Hi, folks. John Dunn here, RPG freelancer, publisher behind Melia Via. I am up here today at Immortals Inc. with Mikey.
What's up, John?
Well, today we're going to talk Legos.
Ooh, Legos.
Well, we're going to talk building.
Oh, we like building.
I like construction as much as anybody, right?
Okay.
And what we're going to talk about today isn't just building one building, but an entire city or town. So we've talked Campaign Builder before, right? We talked Castles and Crowns, which is ironically book 2 of the series. Well, we managed to get book 1 in, Cities and Towns. And I think we said some nice things about Castles and Crowns and all of that and more with Cities and Towns, right? So there is one more book coming in this series, or at least one more, called Dungeons and Runes. That one I think is still in production. But there was a big team of folks at Kobold involved in this. They did a Kickstarter back in May of 22, had about 4,000 backers, raised almost $250,000, and actually ended up delivering the book early.
Wow.
So we're a little behind schedule talking about a 22 book now. But in any case, I think it's a pretty solid book. It's targeted at 5th edition gaming. I believe that includes compatibility with Tales of the Valiant.
Nice.
We talked about the Game Master's Guide for that pretty recently. And so let's just kind of dive in, right? The first chapter of it is about city planning. So you get about 30 pages on that. Talks about the age, whether it's, fairly new town that hasn't been around very long, or one that's ancient with, hundreds or even thousands of generations. Why the town exists, its purpose. This could be production, if they're manufacturing something. It could be trade if they're located, at a convenient juxtaposition of a mountain pass or, a river or just a well-established traveling route. It could be military, right? Maybe this is a recruitment center. We certainly have plenty of military towns in the U.S.
Yes.
There might be a political reason. Maybe there was a treaty that was signed there, or it's a capital that was established just because of its location. Maybe there's religious significance, or maybe it's just a beautiful area and it draws in tourists. Based on which of these regions you have and what kind of climate you have, there may be trade goods that are particularly common in the area. And maybe, that could be a key element in setting up your campaign, right? If you want to do some kind of a trading game. I always think of Wing Commander Privateer, which is probably a video game that is 20 years older than you. But it's one of those games where you would purchase specific trade goods and take it to another town because they were more valuable there.
Nice.
Right? So if maybe your characters were built around being part of a campaign a caravan or a business, that might factor in really well if you're building multiple towns in this way.
Good point.
Then we just establish a size and a population. It could be, just a small commune, or it could be a sprawling metropolis. What type of government system? And there are many, many options to address when we get into that. And then how magic affects the city and what ramifications that has. And this can have ramifications for, even very seemingly mundane things like, how are the buildings going up, right? Are we using, ropes and pulleys to get things up to a higher level, or do we have an air elemental just conveniently lift our materials up?
Like
right?
the pyramids.
Absolutely. Aliens. But also, sanitation, right? So how are we dealing with wastewater, right? These are all things that might have a mundane solution or might be highly magical in a campaign setting where magic is key to it. Chapter 2 dives into the anatomy of a city. It's about 40 pages. It gets into mapping. It talks about what sources you might use for a map. A really handy source is the U.S. Government Geological Survey.
Oh,
familiar with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so all of those maps are in the public domain. So you can always just hop out, look through the U.S. Geological Survey maps, and completely ignore all the lines that are there and just use the terrain.
Wow.
And use that to kind of set up an area that, hey, it's natural. This is the way the world actually developed.
Yeah.
Right? You can, of course, create your own, and there's some ideas there on how to do that. a discussion of what natural resources are nearby, whether there's mines or, a good water resource or, some kind of convenient energy source could be valuable. What type of climate you've got. So if it's northern or tropical or really just nice temperate, and what kind of weather cycles they're subject to. The architecture, which is going to be based on a combination of the technology, the culture, the age of the buildings, and the climate, right? So if you're going to have an Arctic climate, your buildings are going to look very different than if you have a tropical one. Though, of course, when you add in magic, it can all be different.
Of course.
And then city districts. So most fantasy cities are going to have probably a docks district, right? Where bad things happen because people are getting off of boats and not sticking around long and just looking for trouble.
Plagues are arriving.
Absolutely. Maybe a military district if you've got a regiment that's based out of there. Typically, there's a marketplace because your player characters are going to want to buy and sell things. There might be a significant government district. Maybe there's a wealthy district, and a whole bunch of other options are presented in this section. In Chapter 3, we talk about who lives here, the inhabitants of the city. This actually gets to be about 65 pages. Covers rulers, guilds, organizations, which could be a very big part. A lot of times maybe you've got a thieves guild, and you might have different merchant guilds or tradesman guilds that maybe they don't get along real well. Could be noble families, could be a religious order. And then there's presented our henchmen, and also monsters. So many of these different inhabitants have stat blocks. Maybe the monsters function as part of the sanitation, right? So maybe you need something going through your sewers, cleaning up the mess. And what happens if your characters are in the wrong place during that cleaning process?
It's over.
Oh, yeah. Could be a real bad day. Chapter 4 talks about city campaigns, presents the role of the city. So really the city becomes essentially a recurring character in your campaign, and it's going to develop over the course of the campaign. You're going to learn about new aspects of its personality, essentially different neighborhoods or different key groups or even different buildings may have different ramifications, and those could be recurring elements as the campaign develops. It's also a question of taxation, right?
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's going to get complicated.
Characters may need to pay taxes.
No.
Yeah, the real nightmare as we entered, as we're deep into tax season now,
yeah,
right? Discussion about urban encounters that maybe are things other than just tax collectors. And ideas for setting up urban adventures and a campaign. A whole lot of different hooks in here. Chapter 5 is called City Heroes. We get about 30 pages of this, and it talks about things like owning property, right? So maybe your character is approaching retirement and they want to set up an inn, or maybe they just want to have a school for training their minions, right?
Okay.
There could be a wide variety of different reasons why they might want to own property and what they do with it. And maybe they need to get a license or who they need to pay off just for a construction fee, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what they're doing. They might have earned a title, maybe as a reward, or maybe they just decided to buy one for themselves. There's options in here for contacts and social networking as you make connections throughout the city, probably in different neighborhoods and at different tiers of society. And then there's some backgrounds, some class options, and some spells and magic items that are very focused specifically on having connections to the city. So maybe the city streets could even talk to your characters in a very literal way. After that, there's about 40 pages of appendices. This includes some random tables, both for building the city and for encounters that they might have there. And there's a great example of a town that grows over time and shows how the map develops over that time. And then there's a few sample battle maps for different locations and buildings. This is a hardcover book. It is full color, Kobold Press. Really fun illustrations throughout, some fun charts, and then really some neat maps that are pretty useful, especially with giving you the idea of what kinds of mapping and what kind of elements you might need to set up a city like this. 256 or so pages, Kobold Press, $50. We've got copies here on the shelf at Immortals Inc. or available at Immortals Inc. online.
Very well said, John. Go check it out below. We'll see you guys next time.
Till next time, folks. Good gaming.